John Gill, Philemon. This has only one chapter, but John Gill is famous for, when there's one chapter, calling it chapter, verse 1, chapter, verse, even though there's one chapter. So we'll follow John Gill no matter what. This is brought to you by Discovering the Scriptures, being read by Dr. Peter John. John Gill, Philemon 1. Scripture quote, Paul, a prisoner of Jesus Christ, unquote. Not made a prisoner for Christ, though he was apprehended, laid hold on, and detained by Christ as a prisoner of hope at his conversion. But this is not intended here. But he was a prisoner at Rome for the sake of Christ, on the account of professing him and preaching in his name. His bonds were for the sake of the gospel of Christ, and therefore they are in this epistle called the bonds of the gospel. He was not a prisoner at any capital crime, and therefore had no reason to be ashamed of his chain, nor was he, but rather gloried in it, as his taking this title and character to himself, and prefixing it to this epistle shows, and which he chooses to make use of, rather than that of the servant of God, or an apostle of Christ, as he elsewhere does, that he might not by constraint or authority, but by love, moved by pity and compassion on Philemon, to grant his request and receive his servant, which, should he deny, would be to add affliction to his bonds, and that this is in his view, in the choice of this character, is manifested from Philemon 1:8. Scripture quote, and Timothy our brother, unquote, not according to the flesh, or as being of the same country, for he was the countryman of neither of them, nor only on account of his being a regenerate then, born of God, a child of God, and of the same family, but chiefly because he was of the same function, was the minister of the gospel. Him the apostle joins with himself in the epistle, and so in the request, because he might be well known to Philemon, and be much respected by him, and to show that they were united in this affair, and both desired this favor of him, hoping that by their joint application it would be obtained. Scripture quote, unto Philemon, our dearly beloved and fellow laborers, unquote. The name of Philemon is Greek. There was a Greek poet of this name and a Greek historian that Pliny made use of in compiling his history. There is indeed mention made of the Jewish writings of a rabbi whose name was Philemo, Philemo. But this our Philemon, Philemon, seems to have been an inhabitant of Colossae, and rather to have been a Gentile than a Jew. He was a rich and hospitable man, and greatly respected, and therefore here called our dearly beloved. That is, dearly beloved by the apostle and Timothy, not only as being a believer, but as being also generous and useful in his station, and likewise as he was a minister of the gospel. For so the next phrase, and fellow laborers, seems to import, for though such are sometimes said to be laborers and fellow helpers with the apostle, who assisted in carrying on the interests of Christ, with their purses and prayers and private conversation, yet, as it is used in the same epistle, of such who were in the work of the ministry, Philemon 24. It is very probable it is so to be were understood here. And now, though these expressions of affection and respect were without dissimulation, nor were they mere compliments, yet the intention of them was to work upon the mind of Philemon, to reconcile him to his servant, suggesting that as he had an interest in the affections of the apostle and others, this would be a means of establishing it, and would be acting agreeable to his character as a minister of the gospel. End of Philemon 1.